If you like playing attacking chess, then you're gonna love this. Today we're gonna go over the top 5 most effective opening traps in the most brutal chess opening ever. Now here, instead of going for knight g5 or whatever, you first play d4, attacking this pawn, and after they take it, you don't recapture, but you just castle. Now here, this leaves black with somewhat uncomfortable choice. If they do nothing, then you can push the pawn forward to e5 on the next move and start getting extra temples by attacking this knight, plus you're ready to take back this pawn on d4 whenever you feel comfortable. However, at this point your opponent realizes that the easiest way to deal with this threat is simply to take this pawn on e4 because it's undefended. And then on the next move, if you try to somehow attack this knight, however you like it, black counts on the move pawn d5, which would solidify the knight, counter the bishop, and therefore black feels completely safe. However, in this position, you play a totally unexpected move. You don't try to play rook e1 and make use of this pin, or queen e2 with the same purpose. You don't try to get your pawn back, but you play the least expected move, the move that inevitably causes symptoms of diarrhea to an unprepared opponent, knight to c3. You just give up this knight and black has a comfortable choice of how they would love to grab it. Of course, the most natural move for black to play is just to win the knight by playing pawn takes c3. We'll talk about that in a moment, but for now let's start with the move knight takes c3, because more advanced level opponents often believe that this move kind of refutes the gambit, but it's not all that simple. We'll see why in a second. Now you recapture and now they go d5. Again, a move in the right direction. They try to gain a tempo and close this diagonal for your bishop. Now you play rook e1, check to the king, they block it, and then the bishop slides back to d3. Now, if black doesn't want to be too greedy and fall behind in development, then they probably are going to just castle. And after that, you play knight takes d4. Now, although computer generally speaking says that this position is fine for black, it's not very comfortable for him to play it, because you've got this open file, you've got two powerful bishops looking towards that direction, you've got your queen that is ready to come out. For black, on the other hand, it's not very clear what to do. They're a pawn up, but what can they really do? They can't develop this bishop to any active square because all these squares are under your control, and therefore he's kind of clueless about what to do. He can trade knight, but so what? He's still left with all the same problems. The most played move here by black is bishop f6. They try to put pressure down here, but then you have a really beautiful line. You start off by going bishop a3, developing a bishop and hitting the rook. And after it goes away, you then throw the queen out, this time threatening queen takes h7 checkmate because we've got this bishop right here. Therefore your opponent plays g6 thinking, okay, I'm fine, I'm covered. But here comes the queen sack. Queen takes d5. All of a sudden, this comes completely out of nowhere. Your opponent clearly didn't expect this to happen. And after they take it, here comes rook takes e8. That was the point of the sacrifice. King has only one move to go to, and then our bishop from the ambush delivers this final blow, and it's a back rank checkmate. The next game initially went quite similarly. Black first took there and then played d5, trying to shut down the diagonal. The bishop slided back to this active diagonal, but black decided to be greedy and to grab this pawn on c3 because it looks like there is no immediate danger for black anyway. White played rook e1 check, bishop closed it, and here comes knight g5. All of a sudden black has some issues. Now this time from g5, together with the bishop, hits this pawn on h7, and for that reason black can't easily castle. Of course black can't just take the knight, because the bishop is pinned. So what does black do? They play h6, of course the most natural move, trying to get this pawn out of danger as well as to kick off your knight from g5. But then, knight takes f7. In the Nakhmanson Gambit, we're not going to back down. We're going to go forward, sacrifice, and go for this all-out attack. So black accepts this, but here comes queen f3 check, and black's in trouble. And as often, these attacks comes from nowhere, but becomes deadly within just a few moves, because what can black do? If the king tries to come back to g8, let's say, or e8, we've got bishop g6. And black is caged, we're gonna play queen to f7 checkmate. We're also eyeing this pawn, we're having pressure down this diagonal, and black is defenseless. In the actual game, black covered, but we ain't gonna stop here, we keep attacking. This time queen h5 check. And now there's another problem, black has to play here, because if the king were on g8, we would have rook to e8. But right now reinforces this idea by going bishop g6, still threatening to go inside with rook to e8. Black tried to cover, but now we've got that nasty move bishop a3. Remember we had it in one of the previous lines as well. This time we're pinning the knight and black is kind of completely paralyzed. It's pretty hard to move for black at all. They tried to play b6, hoping to go c5 and to block the bishop. However, here comes another sacrifice. Rook takes e7. Now we've got this bishop, which guards the rook, and if the rook is taken, The queen slides back to f3, check. It's important that the bishop is pinned. Can't go away, because as computer shows us, the bishop is pinned. Therefore, the king has to go, but here comes queen to f7. The next line is really funny, and you're highly likely to see it in your own games if you actually start playing this gambit yourself. In this case, black just decided to take on c3 without any intermediate moves. And initially it looks good for black. White still played the same check, bishop covers, and now knight g5. Kind of similar attacking attempt to go forward and create threats, but this time it's slightly different. This time we're hitting this pawn. And black decided to just castle, looks like an easy solution, but after that, here comes queen h5. This time you're threatening the h7 pawn, queen h7 checkmate. Plus we attack this pawn 3 times, but again, looks like there is a simple solution for black, just trade off this knight. However, after bishop g5, here's the point where it's time for your opponent to start thinking, and after a little thinking to resign, because it turns out that the queen all of a sudden is trapped. It can't go to the e file because we've got the rook there, they can't move this pawn because it's pinned down to the king, and therefore it's really resignable for black. Now let's come to the main line, when black accepts the knight sacrifice and takes it with their own pawn. And here is another surprise that black is going to face here. Bishop takes f7. You just don't stop sacrificing your pieces, calling the king out. After king takes, here comes queen to d5, and you take aim at the king right away. Now, in the vast majority of the cases, your opponents are going to play king to e8 because that's the most natural move to play. King e7 is weird because it kind of blocks the pieces. King g6 doesn't make much sense because you're going to grab the knight with check, and black has to move the king after that anyway. Stockfish suggests king to f6, but it looks crazy from human perspective because the king just moves forward, kind of looks like give up chess. So king e8 is the move that most of your opponents are going to play. Now I play another prudent move. You don't play queen takes e4, but instead you play rook e1. Not only you want to take back the knight, but you want to also involve your rook into the attack, because after that, that's going to be a check to the king. So they want to cover, then you play rook takes e4, and now indeed your rook is involved into the attack. Now, they got to do something. So they can't castle, of course, because their king has moved already and you control the square. So they play rook f8. Now, they try to somehow involve their own rook as well into the defense. And you go bishop g5, and on the next move, you plan to go rook e1, focusing all your efforts against this bishop and against the king, because you just want to checkmate it. Here, there's a very common error for black, is going rook f7. Looks solid, but in fact does nothing. Because after your trade here on e7, it turns out that they can't recapture with the rook, that is just checkmating 1. And if instead they capture with a knight, then you play knight g5. You see it's a very common attacking move that we play in many of these lines. We threaten this rook, and it turns out that the rook on f7 only gave you an extra tempo for your knight to jump forward, and it did nothing else besides that. Now they gotta come back to f8. If not, queen g8 would always be a threat, so they come back. Then you play rook e1, and now that's an ideal setup. All your pieces are targeting the king. You want to just break through and checkmate it. Now black is unsure what to do, so they decided to at least take this pawn and hopefully somehow distract white, because this pawn is indeed a little bit annoying. And of course, you got to be careful not to let black promote it. But now there are a number of ways for white to continue the attack. In the game they played queen a5. We'll talk about that in a second. Knight takes h7 would also be a very nice move with a lot of threats, to this rook, some queen h5 checks, etc. If they come here, by the way, let this be a puzzle of the day, all right? It's white to play and win. Of course, there are many ways to develop the attack, but there is one move that is the strongest, and in the main line, it's going to be checkmate in 1, 2, 3 moves. So if you can find it, please write it down in the comments below. In the actual game, white decided to stack all his pieces along the e-file. Black tried to deflect white from this idea, but white just ignored this queen completely, simply took on e7, and after king goes to d8, here comes the final knight sacrifice, knight to f7, and after that, rook e8 is a beautiful checkmate. We're still in the main line, the one you're going to see most often probably in your games. If you remember, in the last game, black played rook f8, trying to get the rook involved, but it kind of failed. This game, black realized that white is going to play rook bishop to g5, trying to make use of this pin, and they try to play pawn h6 to get control of the square so that I can't go there with either a bishop or a knight. However, it failed badly. White indeed did not develop the bishop right here, because instead he sacked it right on h6. It's funny how often you can sacrifice something and finish the game in style. So if you play this gambit, you've got a great chance to play your immoral game, and even if you lose all the other games, when you play it, you'll still be able to brag about this one immortal game for the rest of your life. So definitely worth a shot. Anyway, so what's the idea of bishop takes? Well, black can take it both ways, but it's not going to be helpful. If rook goes, we already know that there is this sneaky checkmate queen to g8. we saw in one of the previous lines as well. I can't cover with the bishop because it's pinned. So that's not going to be helpful. And if the bishop is captured by the pawn, then it enables queen h5 check, and black does not have this pawn to g6 option to cover the king. Therefore, the king is now completely exposed, and you just keep attacking it. Rook f4, check to the king, you're threatening queen f7, checkmate on the next move. If they try to cover, then you just play queen g6, and on the next move, rook takes f6, check to the king, and it's going to be a checkmate within a few moves, so black just resigned. These were the most effective opening traps of the Nakhmanson Gambit, and if you want to see the opening crash course so that you understand the opening more thoroughly, check out this video right here. If you want me to help you to level up your positional understanding, because that's actually the most important chess skill, check out this free masterclass. And of course, let me know how did the Nakhmanson Gambit worked out for you. I'm curious to know.